And good morning. It is Wednesday, October 16th, 10 a.m. on the dot. My name is Ryan Belmore. I'm the owner and publisher of What's Up Noop. And we have a lot to get to today. It is our monthly chat with Newport City Manager Colin Kennedy, and he joins us for his second time. And Colin, how are you?
Good, Ryan. How are you? Good morning.
Morning. It is it's a big day. It's Wednesday, October 16th. It is the first day of voting.
Yep.
And we're going to talk. We only have 30 minutes. Here's what we're going to try to talk about today for those who are tuning in. We're going to talk about early voting, the logistics with that at City Hall. We're going to, of course, touch base on utilities billing, which might be more important than early voting to many people. And we're going to get back to voting and talk about question 6, which is the Newport question on the bond. So early voting. Have you seen anybody turn out yet today?
I have. We've had a small surge this morning, which is typical on the first day of early voting. This year, what's different is that or this cycle, I should say, what's different is that we are on the ground floor of City Hall because of the malfunction of our elevator. So we have a conference room that's similarly sized to the one that our residents are familiar with on the second floor of City Hall. This one's on the ground floor. So when you come in at street level, don't go up the stairs, just walk around the corner of the stairs into the ground floor, and there will be directions leading you to the early voting location, which is obviously accessible because of its level with the street. So that was important to meet ADA compliance. We regret the elevator malfunction. We'll have that fixed hopefully by the beginning of December. But in the meantime, folks are welcome and welcome to come out and vote. We are open for business 8:30 to 4:30 during normal business hours through November 4th, starting today.
All right, we are back.
Gotcha.
Right? Can you?
Yep, I think I got. I think did you hear the? The last thing I mentioned was about the hours 8:30 to 4:30 on normal business days. Early voting available. I think everything else came out before we got disconnected.
Yeah, it looks like somebody's Wi-Fi froze up for a minute there, but so early voting has begun and it's on the first floor due to the elevator being out of service. It is open through Monday, November 4th. And then people can vote in person at their polling location on November 5th. You could drop off your ballots at City Hall. There's a box out front.
That's correct.
If you need to find your, if you want to see your sample ballot, which we're going to talk about a lot today, some of the items on there, vote.ri.gov or the City of Newport's website. Just a quick on the elevator watch. Any updates on when we might see the elevator back in?
Yes, so probably we're targeting the early part of December. Our goal is to make it available before the first City Council meeting of the new term, which I believe is on December 11th. I think it's the second Wednesday in December. Yeah, December 11th. So we hope to have it back up and running by early December. The reason it's taking a while is because it's the computer drive within the elevator that broke. It's under warranty. Luckily, it should not have broken, but it did. So we had to rig it out. We needed professional riggers to come in and lower the elevator so that we could grab the drive. Then we have to ship it to the United Kingdom, which is where it'll be serviced, and ultimately have it shipped back and re-rigged in. So it's a complicated process. Elevators are tough, but we hope to have that done by the early part of December, and we regret the inconvenience.
Excellent. Something else people might be calling City Hall or coming to City Hall about is utilities billing, that sewer fee that just won't go away. Some bills came in the mail this week. Give us an update on that.
Yeah, I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to address that. So fear not. We hope that people are not panicking. The September bill was the one that we purposely delayed while we worked out how we were going to do the credits for both the August and the September bills. But per Public Utilities Commission regulations, we did have to eventually mail that bill. And the intention was to mail those at the September and the October bills at the same time. But the September bill was mailed on Friday. The October bill was mailed one business day later, which happened to be on the other side of a long weekend. So long story short, the October bills are imminent. They will be in mailboxes by Thursday or Friday. We encourage our ratepayers to do nothing with their September bills until they see their October bills. but because that will contain the credits for the overcharges in both August and September. Just to kind of indicate, I have a little diagram here for our viewers to see. I'll stabilize it here for you. But this is a pamphlet that's going to be in the October bill, and it has some descriptions that show what where the credits are going to be located and how our ratepayers can read those. And again, the stuff in the yellow boxes should be two negative numbers. That's assuming that anyone paid less than had less than 4,100 gallons of usage in either August or September. If they had more than that, then there was no impact on their bill. So we didn't intend for people to panic with the September bills. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain, sort of like Wizard of Oz. Wait till the October bill comes out and you will see those credits issued. And then the October bill itself, for the usage in the previous month, the base charge will be off of that bill. So there should be 2 credits plus no base charge on that October bill. Ultimately, then when you mesh all that up together, most users who did not use much volume in August and September will probably see a very small bill that they'll owe for October, much smaller than normal. That's a 1-month anomaly because of the credit, so we don't want people to get used to that. But that's how they're going to get their money back, is by not having to pay that money in the October bill. Hopefully that makes sense, and we apologize for any concern or panic that caused. The refunds are coming. They will be documented on the October bill, which should be out by the end of the week, because they were put in the mail yesterday.
And if you couldn't follow along with all of that, City of Newport's website has this breakdown of the billing updates. One thing to note, and you may have said it, September and October bills aren't due until November 13th.
Yes.
So once you get that other bill, then everything will be due November 13th, and then everything should be good moving forward after that.
That's correct. The October bills will have the effect of stabilizing the billing, and then when you get your bill in early November for any of the usage you partake in October, that will look like a normal bill as it always has been, with no base charge applied. And everything should be back to normal by the time November rolls around. So credits in October, back to normal billing periodicity and appearance in November.
So the biggest takeaway, just to reiterate it, is sit on that bill that you just got, wait for the next bill, and then pay it by November 13th, and then you're set.
That's correct. And we purposely pushed out that due date to November to give our ratepayers a chance to examine the math and to make sure that it was accurate. And because there hasn't been a bill in a while, we didn't want to shock everybody with something that was due instantaneously. So both the September and the October bill, and again, the October should reflect some credits that you wouldn't see on the September bill. All of that isn't due until November 13th, to give everybody a chance to kind of catch up and get back into sync with their billing. And we felt that was the most fair way to handle the situation.
Excellent. And of course, I'm sure people won't hesitate, but if something doesn't look right on that October bill, do reach out to the city and let them know what doesn't look right, so that way they can rectify it. Absolutely. We are happy to answer those questions. We hope that the product we put in with the October bill will help explain what those credits look like and what they should look like. But again, if there are any additional questions, by all means, please reach out to the Utilities Department. They will be happy to answer those questions. And I don't want to confuse it going any further, but city administration as well as city council will look at what they were attempting to do with that sewer tax. The new council will look at it as well as the administration down the line. Correct. We're, in fact, on this next docket, which should be available to the public to see on Thursday morning. One of the items you'll see is a communication from me is something we already had budgeted, but it's a full rate study for all things water, stormwater, and wastewater, trying to get a better handle on the equity in which we charge our customers, particularly for stormwater. So we're going to have a professional firm come in and figure out a better way to measure stormwater usage than just. It's not as simple as, the water that comes in is the water that goes out. That makes sense for wastewater to some extent, but it bears no resemblance to stormwater, and yet that's how we've been charging our customers. And that's not atypical in America. Many communities do it that way, but the science is showing us that there are a lot of other factors that drive stormwater and the proportional responsibility from one property to another.
And we know that there's a much more fair way to do this, and so we're hiring a professional consultant to help us drive towards that end state, so that in the future we're able to get the revenue we need, but do it in a more equitable way. So we're very much looking forward to the outcomes of that within the next year or so.
And to further clarify, the revenue you need, for those who haven't been paying attention to the city council meetings, the revenue is needed because of all those old pipes and infrastructure that's buried underneath the city that eventually at one time or another is going to need to be fixed, replaced, modernized, whatever it may be.
Absolutely. A lot of them are still old clay pipes. Some of them are holding up better than others, but they're very old. I remember, I think it was a couple of council meetings ago, I believe it was the mayor, I can't remember, I don't want to misquote, but one of the council members kind of half joked that some of the infrastructure we have was the same ones that were the same pipes that were used by the Vanderbilts when they lived here. So that just explains how old our infrastructure is and how critical it is to get after some of these repairs. Every couple of days, I get a new picture from the utilities director about what they've dug up in an emergency situation. And emergency repairs are very expensive, and this is not sustainable. So we do need the revenue to modernize our system from many decades of deferred maintenance. But we have to do it in a fair and equitable way, and we recognize that. And this upcoming rate study that we're going to contract to do, hopefully coupled with some additional technology in the future, will really help us more equitably distribute those costs among our customers.
City Manager, turning back to the election, now that we're officially, people are voting.
Yes.
There is a 2024 election guide that was sent out or is being sent out. Has it already been sent out by the city?
So there's an election guide that I can't speak to that directly. I know the election guide is more just how to vote, and that's sent out, I believe, through the state. Now, what we sent out as a city staff was an information sheet specifically about question 6, which is our bond referendum that's on the ballot. There are 5 questions that are going to be on the ballot in front of that. Those are all state questions. Question number 6 in Newport is the bond referendum. And while we're not necessarily urging voters to vote one way or another, it would be ethically irresponsible to do that, at least from the perspective of the city staff. What we are doing is pointing out what we believe are the pros and cons to a yes or a no vote, or a yes or no outcome on that bond. Speaking as a fellow taxpayer, I think the numbers very much support passage of the bond measure. I look at it as a taxpayer, I look at it as paying insurance. Just like I pay insurance on my vehicle or my home so that if I have an unexpected bit of damage, I'm not suddenly saddled with a shocking amount of cost to replace that vehicle. The bond works the same way. It spreads out the cost of repairs over up to 30 years so that our taxpayers see a very small increase one time instead of a sudden shock cost if we have a catastrophic failure of one of our key pieces of infrastructure. An example of that might be the Parati Park bulkhead. Within 1 to 3 years, because of all the impacts of climate change, that bulkhead is going to fail. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when. And that when is very soon. And the cost to replace that bulkhead is going to be about $20 million, and the associated repairs to Parati Park and the Harbor Master building. I would much rather be able to borrow funds from an authorized bond referendum and spread that cost out over 30 years at a very small rate of tax increase than to suddenly have to ask our voters or suddenly have to go to the office of the Auditor General and say, oops, our bad, we didn't properly plan for this, and now we have this emergency and we have to fix it. And I'm suddenly asking for like a tax increase that's 4 or 5 times higher than what it would have been with the bond passage. In a worst case scenario, if I need $20 million in a year, that's going to cost my average valued property owner to pay about an extra $1,660. The bond referendum, on the other hand, would only cost that same average taxpayer about $346. Spread out over a year, that's 95 cents a day. So to me, that's the analogy there is that's insurance. I want to buy that insurance as a voter so that I'm not saddled with, or I don't run the risk of being saddled with an exorbitant shock increase in my tax bill in the next few years. Now, are there other ways that if the bond doesn't fail, if the bond doesn't pass, we are professional city staff. We are prepared to look at what the day after tomorrow looks like. But some of the alternative funding sources are not very appealing. They involve some much higher interest loans. They would involve more outreach to the General Assembly for permission for other smaller bonds. That's a lot more. That's a lot more cost of bond issuance. Also, some of these products that are out there in the marketplace might involve putting up city property as collateral, which is never an appealing thing to do. And we won't get the same bond ratings and prices that we would through a general obligation bond like we're asking to have the voters approve. So could we do it? Yes, it would probably involve some very high cost alternative revenue sources plus tax increases that would far exceed the amount that would be involved if the bond passes. And we'll be prepared to do that if we need to. But as a fellow taxpayer, that's not a dice roll that I want to make. And so
I'm wondering if we could take a step back quickly, if you could describe, and I know you were not hired yet, but if you could just remind people how these projects were chosen, how they ended up, why they were chosen now, and how we kind of put this bond question together, we as the city.
Yeah, absolutely. We in total we have about $500 million in projects that if we could wave a magic wand and do them all, we would do them all overnight. But we know there are certain projects such as the Parati Park bulkhead, Easton's Beach, nourishment of that beach, the protection of Easton's Pond, which is the vast majority of our drinking water supply. These are the things that are most at risk from climate change today. And so they were racked and stacked to get the highest priority. And so once we put all those things together, about 51% of this bond has some direct nexus to sea level rise and climate change and sustainability. And then the other aspects are loosely related to that in the form of things like road repairs or figuring out what to do with the dirt pile at Rogers High School. So we felt all of these things were the most prescient issues out of that $500 million. So we took about the top fifth of that, racked and stacked it, and came up with this list. The acquisition of land for a new public safety facility because our headquarters of our fire station keeps flooding. That's another item that made the list as well, because that's very important to work on within the next 5 years or so because of climate change. So all of these things were racked and stacked in that way. I would also add, importantly, that we also looked for projects that had an enhanced return on investment through grants. So for example, if we spend $5.375 million on the design and study for the stormwater control in the North End with the Elizabeth Brooks study, we could potentially put ourselves in position to receive up to $60 million. That's 60 million in future federal grants just by having done that design in the Elizabeth Brook watershed. And that's definitely much needed work because we have a huge flooding problem on the North End. But if we have to find the money in the general fund to spend this, it just puts that much more of a strain on our budget. Whereas if we have bond funds to spend on this design, now we've essentially, we have the potential to receive $8 or $9 for every $1 we spend through bond funds because of future grant opportunities that would otherwise remain unlocked if the bond were not passed. So this is to really help us out with some of the matching funds that are available through other sources. Another good example is the cliff walk repairs. I believe it's, you have it in front of it. Yeah, 3.75 million could ultimately, if spent, net an additional 13 million for that cliff walk. There's no way we can fix the cliff walk with 3.75 million, but we can certainly fix it with 13 or 14 million. And so by having some skin in the game through bond funds, we're in a much better position to take advantage of some of those grant matches, which oftentimes quadruple or even quintuple the amount of funds that we have to have involved. So, when you add it all up, we probably, for all those projects with grant matches, we're probably getting $2 back for every $1 we spend. And some of those projects are much more significant than even that. So to me, it just makes a lot of fiscal sense to be able to go after some of this free money that's available from other governments, such as the federal government and the state government.
I'm glad you brought up the study because the studies that are included in here, because there has been some criticism of why are we passing a bonds to get to a study? Why don't we do a study before we pass the bonds? But what I'm taking away is by doing these studies, let's the 5.3 million for the Elizabeth Brook, that could result in a lot more money.
Absolutely. I'm glad you brought that. That's a key takeaway. Perhaps we haven't done as good of a job as we could have explaining that, but that's what I want every voter to hear, is that these are funds that our general fund simply does not have the flexibility right now to we can't just cut a check today and pay 5.375 million for Elizabeth Brook and 3.75 million for the Cliff Walk, et cetera, et cetera. We just don't have that flexibility. With the bond, with access to funds that we can borrow through the bond, we spread out that cost over 30 years, so we keep the cost to taxpayers low. But by doing so now, we very quickly have access to additional federal and state grant sources that can really double and triple the amount of money we have available to us because we have access to these funds. So we may miss the boat if we don't have the access to the capital funds right now to take advantage of some of these grants. And that's one of the huge benefits that the bond allocation offers us.
So I don't expect you to have this number, but you could probably just say it'll be a whole lot more. If we pass this $98.5 million bonds, what do you guesstimate? I want to use guesstimate very lightly there, that the actual return could possibly be with matching funds and all of that?
For the projects that have matching funds associated with them, I think it's about 2 times. So about $50.2 million is earmarked for resilience stuff, and about 30 million of that has grant matches. That 30 million could turn into upwards of 70 or 80 million in additional funds that we could see. So again, that's a best case scenario, but there's a lot of grant opportunities out there that we cannot even apply for until we've properly done the studies and the assessments. So we have to put the horse in front of the cart here, and if we do that, responsibly and appropriately, and again, access to funds that we can borrow are a very, very responsible and appropriate way to do that, we will see a huge return on our investment. Probably complete some of those projects well before the 30-year point. Start getting some revenue from those by increasing the tax base in the north end, or having additional cruise ship fees that are available to take up at Parati Park. And ultimately, if we play our cards correctly and responsibly, not have to be paying the bond back for 30 years. Maybe we'll be able to retire a lot of that debt in just 20 years and save even more money on interest payments. So we're definitely setting up the deck here to be able to get a huge return on our investment, both through grants and through increasing the tax base, so that our taxpayers, have as little impact as possible in the long run. We have some of the best property tax rates in the state in Rhode Island. Our resident taxpayers are paying $6.97 per $1,000 of assessed value. East Greenwich, they're paying $21. That's an extreme example, but many communities. Middletown is somewhere in the upper 8s, if I recall correctly. So we love the fact that we have very hospitable property tax rates in Newport, and we want to keep it that way. And having access to funds that we can borrow at a reasonable interest rate are one of the ways that we help to do that.
One of the neat things that I think the city has provided is this map that kind of shows where the work is going to be, all of the bond items, and you can see them there. I was wondering if, let me go 2 different ways. Mm-hmm. One, I'm going to ask, I'm going to make a statement. This work has to be done no matter what. So from how I understand it, listening to last Wednesday's city council meeting again this morning, this work has to be done no matter what. So it's how are we going to pay for it?
Correct.
Are we going to pay for it through the bond, or are we going to pay through it through a significant tax increase?
That's exactly right. And that's the message that I want our residents to hear. These aren't options. They were options 20 years ago. They're no longer options because we deferred them. We kicked the can down the road way too long. And now we have a bulkhead at Parati Park that's in danger of completely collapsing. There's a sinkhole already starting in one of the corners. But we're one storm away from a complete collapse of that bulkhead. We need to do this. Even more importantly, I would talk about the nourishment of Easton's Beach. And one thing I want to point out about nourishment, what nourishment means, nourishment is not 600 trucks carrying sand into Newport. Nourishment is an oceanographic and technical term that describes an entity, usually the Army Corps of Engineers, although there's other agencies and companies that can do this. They take giant dredges, they go out into the ocean, in this case at First Beach, and they dredge sand back towards the beach that Mother Nature has eroded out to sea over the course of many years. So the sand is there. We don't need to truck it in. It's already there. It's just been gradually washed out to sea over the decades. Nourishment involves dredging to bring that sand back into the beach. The sand, so we don't have to buy it. It's already there. We bring that back in, and then we construct some wave breaks and some seawalls to discourage, the effects of waves from bringing that sand back out to sea again. Now, there will always be some nourishment that needs to be done on a periodic basis, and we can budget for that in the future. But right now, we need the whole kit and caboodle so that we can, continue to have structures on the beach that we love and appreciate. We've already lost a few. We want to see what we can save. But at the very least, if we build new structures, this will prevent them from being eroded away by a low-lying beach. Two, it protects Memorial Boulevard, which is a critical evacuation route. We've seen Memorial Boulevard flood in the past. We need to prevent that from happening in the future, especially in the event that we need to evacuate people from the city. And third, and I would argue most importantly, is that eventually sea level rise, if left unchecked, will begin to tear away at the levee that protects us from the primary source of our drinking water. Easton's Pond is where we get most of our drinking water from. We have other sources in the city, but the bulk of it's coming from Easton's Pond. And if that levee were to break and all of that water were to spill out into the ocean, first we'd have a levee to fix, but more importantly, we'd lose instantaneously a huge amount of our drinking water. And it would really put an emergency strain on the city. That's going to happen in 5 to 10 years if we do nothing at Easton's Beach. And if we do nothing to harden those levees and the dam that supports it. So these are no longer optional things. These are must-do maintenance updates that will protect the future sustainability of our city. So I would prefer to spread those costs out over 30 years and have a small tax increase to service the funds we borrow from a bond. Alternatively, however, we would this isn't if, this is when, at some point we're going to have to figure out how to recover from a catastrophic failure of one of those things. And it would not be pretty to the taxpayers. So again, speaking as a fellow taxpayer, because I'm in Newport now, I just moved 3 weeks ago. I'm here. I'm with you all. I don't want to be saddled with that kind of a bill. I want to do this responsibly. I want to treat it like insurance, as my analogy from previous.
Colin, are we, with a lot of these projects, are we where we're at right now because of the quick speed of sea level rise and deferred maintenance? I'm not looking to put blame anywhere. I'm just looking, for those who might be looking around saying, why is all this happening right now? How do you? Yeah,
I think you're right. I think it's important not to cast blame on the past. That wouldn't be responsible. But to say that we've had choices before that we've passed on, probably for reasons that I don't want to say even political. That's probably not. It's just pragmatic. It just never seemed to be as prescient as it is now. But then we had in the last 3 years, we've had several. And these aren't even hurricanes, right? These are winter storm events, these powerful nor'easters that have increased in intensity even in just the last 5 years. Some of it might have been based on an El Nino or a La Nina weather pattern, but all in all, there have been an increase in these sharply powerful nor'easters in the past few years. And I think I would look at that as a blessing in disguise. Because what they've had the effect of doing, though causing some damage to the cliff walk and eroding Easton's Beach even more and putting more pressure on Parati Park seawall and other types of things, what they've also done is galvanized attention towards an issue that already existed. So in a sense, I kind of view them as a blessing in disguise. They've kind of woken up the city a bit. They forced the capital improvement plan program to really take a serious look at some of these issues, to really document the fact that we're about $500 million down, and that we have about $100 million worth of maintenance that we really need to focus on here and now. So it's certainly not meant to be something that we missed. But there has been some deferred maintenance, and it's been exacerbated by an increasing storm rate over the past 3 or 4 years.
You can answer this as a resident or as a city manager, but many of these, while people are considering this, there are also people out there who don't believe in climate change and say the sea level isn't rising; it's always rising, it's always changing. Is there a project, or is there? We talked about it last time we spoke. You went to school for oceanography, and I'm just wondering if there's something you point to for those people who can't see that things are changing.
I would just, there are some that feel that climate change is caused by humans. There are some that feel that climate change is caused by natural processes. What I would say from my oceanographic background is that sea levels have risen and fallen for millennia. Whether it's human driven or not, these things can happen. They're measurable. We can use things like rock formations and tree rings, mineral deposits. We can there's fingerprints that Mother Nature leaves that tell us that these things do happen. And right now we have the measurements to show that their sea level is increasing. From my perspective, I don't particularly care how that happened. It's what my responsibility is as a city manager is to look into the data, is to acknowledge the fact that these are things that are measured and are happening. And like any coastal community in America, because we're all in the same boat. Coastal communities around America are dealing with this, around the world, frankly. It's our responsibility to meet the challenge of what we're dealing with right now. And what we're dealing with right now is rising water and increased erosion. It's unlikely that this is going to abate anytime soon. Maybe 100 years from now, 1,000 years from now, it might, but we don't have that long. We have to deal with the data that we have now, and the data we have now says that these things are happening and are impacting our quality of life, and they cannot go unaddressed.
You've answered many of the questions we received. Let's see here. I have one from, especially regarding beach nourishment, but I have one that I don't think we've touched on. Pete writes in, and how will money in the bond for Rogers completion be managed? There are some concerns about just more money going towards Rogers. Will it be the city or school building committee? Does it include removal of the pile currently residing on the old Rogers track? Pretty much, how does that money that's in the bond get used at Rogers, and who's it responsible for?
Yeah, so and again, I just want to remind everybody that the allocations that the council published were just a point of departure. It's a plan to deviate from. So we may or may not need some of that money, the $10 million for the Rogers site, but we wanted to make sure that we at least had some ability to use that if necessary. The school itself does not need another $10 million. The building itself does not. So if at all any portion of bond funds go towards the school, it would be minuscule, probably 2 or 3 million tops, and maybe none at all. The school building just recently received a $2.5 million grant to help them finish their project. That's $2.5 million that the taxpayers will no longer have to fund. There are also some contingency funds that may be refunded at the end of the project, which would further reduce the impact on taxpayers. So we are getting to the point where the amount remaining for the school is very small. I know it was a tough road to get there, but we are reaching that point. But it's not just the building; it's also the pile. But there's good news about the pile. Some of the Rhode Island Department of Environmental Management standards for that pile have now been adjusted downward to be more commensurate with the way they are in nearby states such as Connecticut and Massachusetts. So we may be able to use some of that soil now for refill, like we'd always expected all along, which means that soil we don't have to remove. And then once we've used some of that soil for fill, safely at the school site, what's left, we may not have to truck off the island. Perhaps we'll just be able to regrade and turn it into a green space or a park. So that's a much smaller expense than having to remove all that soil off island. So there's some promising developments in the realm of the school and the dump site and the soil pile that may mitigate what we need to spend. So we've allocated $10 million as a placeholder. Perhaps we won't need that much. I can't make any promises, but the way I look at it is that the pressure on that site is decreasing at this point. And so we will never sell a bond that we don't need to. So just because I have the authority to borrow money doesn't mean I necessarily will as a community. Alternatively, having the flexibility means that let's say we only use 2 million of that on anything related to Rogers, dump site, pile, or school. That leaves 8 million that if another emergency, opens up, now I have the flexibility to borrow funds that without a bond authorization, I would not. So all of that, in summary, all of that would still have to go through the city council. Just because we have the ability to borrow money does not mean that the city council does not have the responsibility and the authority to look at each individual bond sale for whatever amount we need to decide yay or nay on those items. So it is not as though the taxpayers are going to be immediately on the hook for $98.5 million. In fact, immediately they'll be on the hook for none of it. And then the city council will begin item by item, starting to determine where they want to borrow funds from and for what purpose. So I think that's important for our residents and taxpayers to know is that saying yes to the bond gives us the ability and the flexibility. It does not give us the authority. Only the city council can grant that authority, and they would do so on a case-by-case basis.
And I think that's a good place to wrap up. I guess I'll just wrap up with what's the biggest misconception about the bond question, or one thing that you would like to wipe clean from the public statements being made out there? What's something everybody should know?
Yeah, I know there's a lot of concern about this bond when they compare it to the Rogers bond from a few years ago in 2020 that passed. That passed for a similar amount of money. What I want folks to realize, and what I hope they will take away from this, is that this is a general obligation bond. It is not a bond that's for a single project. This bond is for a multitude of projects that we believe are very urgent and pressing for the city to handle. But it's the similar amount, but it's not, since it's not for one project, it gives us as taxpayers via our elected representatives a lot of flexibility as to how we ultimately want to borrow funds and what projects we want to spend them on. The allocations is just a roadmap, and I appreciate the city council's effort to kind of articulate what they would use that 98.5 for, but we also know that conditions change, circumstances change, events change, life changes, and so we're not dedicating all of this money to one project up front. We're actually what it's giving us is the flexibility to respond to emergencies as they occur, or at least to commence the maintenance to prevent the emergencies on a case-by-case basis. So it's a general bond. It's not an individual item bond, and I think there's a lot of distrust out there and concern that this is going to cause an inflation of costs, such as the Rogers School site did, but that's not the case. We cannot spend or borrow more than 98.5 from this bond. So if there are other items that come up, unlike the school, which is sort of a must pay, those other items would be nice to pays, and then we'd have to figure out ways to use general fund revenue or additional bond measures in the future to deal with that. But we're not saddling ourselves with the threat of any overage from this bond like we may have with the Rogers bond. And that's not to speak ill of the Rogers effort. They faced a lot of tough challenges, as many folks did during the post-COVID construction era. But this bond will not go over that amount. I think that's a key takeaway.
Excellent. City Manager, I promise to get you out of here on time, and I'm 0 for 2 on doing that. But
it's okay, Ron. I appreciate it.
Is there anything that we didn't get to today that you wanted to make sure that we got out there?
No, I think we covered everything. I appreciate it. I really do appreciate the opportunity to kind of explain the billing for utilities and where we're at with that. We're again, the October bills will be out in the next couple of days, and there'll be a mailer in there, like I showed you, that has articulates where the credits are and how we've refunded those overcharges to our ratepayers. So I just I respectfully request a little more patience from our residents. They'll see those very soon. And I believe that they'll feel made whole at that point, as promised by the city council from the ordinance rescission. Other than that, you've covered everything. I encourage people to come by City Hall anytime, 8:30 to 4:30 over the course of the next month. Go ahead and vote until November 4th. And then on November 5th, we'll have the normal precinct site set up from 7 a.m. until I think 8 p.m. on election day. So looking forward to seeing everybody exercise their civil rights.
All right, excellent. Well, thank you very much for taking the time, City Manager. We will talk to you again next month.
All right, thank you, Ron. I appreciate it.
All right, so that is Newport City Manager Colin Kennedy. Joins us this time every single month, pending any holidays or anything else that may pop up. Full schedule available on whatsupnoop.com. If you missed any portion of this conversation, want to watch it again, want to share it, want to listen to it, want to read about it, all available on whatsupnoop.com. CityofNewport.com will have all the details you need to know about the bond item, about the sewer tax billing, any updates. They'll also have all the information you need to know about early voting and voting on Election Day. That's going to do it for this time. We will chat with you next time. Thanks for watching.